as that which a willing payer would pay a willing buyer for a specific property, neither party being under duress to either buy or sell the property. They accumulate all of those usable sales in a sampling period, and they come up with an average. The average in the last 1 year sampling period for Maplewood was 87.67%, comparing what a property sells for as compared to its assessed value. More important, they look at the coefficient of deviation. Coefficient of deviation is a mathematical measurement of the uniformity of those assessments. You may have a 75% ratio, for example. But in arriving at that 75%, if half of the community is at 50% and the other half is at 100%, yes, you have a 75% ratio of assessment to sale, but you certainly do not have uniformity. And so that coefficient, we try to get as low as possible. The state standard is 10%. Anything below 10% is acceptable. We strive for much better than that in our revaluation and reassessment efforts. So the county board ordered this revaluation, and the Township of Maplewood proposed an alternative whereby a reassessment was thought to be in the best interest of the municipality, primarily because reassessment in this case was far less money than a full revaluation. Now, we will make the process as open as we possibly can. To that end, we have a website, www.asinj.com, that you can access from the onset of the program. And it will provide significant information. In the beginning, it will provide the identity of those individuals who will be inspecting all of the properties. It will provide information as to their location. It will eventually provide all of the assessments that we come up with, so that you'll be able to compare all other similar properties in order to determine whether we've met our obligation. Now, our obligation is to meet the two very important tenets of the state constitution as it relates to taxation. Number one, that all property be assessed at 100% of its true market value. And that means we look at sales of usable sales. Second, and most important, is that it be done by the same standard of value. And that's critical. That ensures that everyone is assessed uniformly, so that no one is paying more or less than their fair share. That's very important in the state of New Jersey. because unfortunately, we are #1 in the country for reliance on property tax to meet budgetary demands. And so it becomes even more critical that this job be done correctly. And the only purpose of revaluation, and I say this with an underline, the only purpose of revaluation is to fairly distribute the tax burden. Revaluation cannot and does not create more revenue. The tax rate is a product of the budget process, and that's what drives either an increase or a decrease in taxes. Revaluation is simply the instrument by which the municipality demonstrates to all of the taxpayers that everyone is paying their fair share, no more and no less. And so we will, through our website, provide all of the information that you need to make a determination as to whether we are achieving those two major goals. As they say, the assessments will all be posted, preliminary assessments will be posted, and the final assessments will be posted. All of the sales that we use to arrive at those assessments will be posted on our website. So now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Jason, who will walk you through the 7 steps of reassessment. And then when he concludes his remarks, I will return to talk about further the statutory scheme as it relates to your rights as property owners.
Thank you, Ernie. As he said, my name is Jason Cohen, and I'm the project manager for Maplewood. Been with Appraisal Systems for about 15 years. And as Ernie said, the purpose of this presentation from this point forward is really to show and explain the process of how we get from the beginning of the project, which is to determine value, to the end of the project where every property in town gets a new value. So tonight's presentation is focused primarily just on the residential inspection process and valuation process. But at the same time, it's important to remember that we're actually valuing every parcel in town. So not just residentials, but commercial properties, vacant land that exists, and even exempt property like this building and churches, schools. So the whole tax list gets a new value, and every property in it gets new values. But as I said, we're going to focus primarily on residentials, and we've broken it down into this PowerPoint, and we broke it into these 7 steps. The first step is to inspect all properties in town, residential, commercial, vacant land exempt. Second step is to analyze the information that's collected both by the inspectors that go out and gather that information, as well as do an analysis of the market data. So for residential properties, that would be primarily sales. So we analyze all the sales data. We then review that information both internally as well as with drive-by inspections if need be. We inform the public of all the new values in the 4th step. 5th step is to meet with any and all taxpayers that request a one-on-one meeting as a result of the new value. And the 6th step is to submit that information both to the town as well as to the County Board of Taxation, the Essex County Board of Taxation. And the 7th step is to defend any tax appeals that arise out of those new values. So we'll go through each step briefly. So as I said, the first step is the inspection, and the inspection kicks off with a letter of introduction and a brochure, which you all should have received at this point. We mailed them 2-3 weeks ago. The letter, there's an example here, you can't really see it on the screen, but the letter is just basically informing the public that we were selected as the firm. It comes from the assessor's office in a Maplewood Township envelope. It explains that this process is happening. It provides you with a phone number to call if you have any questions to our office. It also encourages you to send in any information that you might have relative to your property, special information about your property, specific circumstances that you want to make us aware of. You can document that and send it to our office. And there's also a brochure that's included with it where it explains what reassessment is, sort of frequently asked questions, things that we're going over tonight. And if you didn't receive one of these letters, it got lost in the mail, or you haven't seen it, we do post it on our website so you can download a copy. If you don't have access and you want a copy, you can always call the office and we'll send another one out to you. So this is sort of the introduction to the township that the process has begun. So once those letters go out, we then start to send inspectors out into the various neighborhoods. And the way that we accomplish this goal of inspecting all these properties in a relatively short period of time is we don't do a first inspection with appointment generally. So our first inspection is unannounced. The letter of introduction serves as the general announcement to the township that we've begun, and then the inspectors are assigned different areas of town, and they'll go out and make first knocks during the day. The most important part for you to remember is that in addition to the first visit being unannounced between 9 and 5, that every inspector has an ID. So the inspectors know they have to wear that ID. It's always on usually on their chest, on a lanyard. There's an example on the slide here. All of the inspectors' information is posted on our website, so you can see on the Maplewood page on the ASI website, you can see what inspectors are working in town. You can see their name, you can see their picture. There's an example of their ID on the website so that you know who's working in town. We also show by address where they're inspecting, so you can also see where they're working in town. Obviously, most importantly, you don't want to let anyone in your house without ID. You know, our inspectors 100% of the time will have that ID on them. So if someone comes to your door and they say that they're with ASI and they don't have that ID, they're not with ASI. And obviously, if you have any concerns, you can call the police before you let them in your property. You can call our office and verify if you want. You can call the assessor's office and verify. The police department know that these people are out and about. They've been certified by the police department. They have their vehicles on record, and they know the general areas where they're working. So if you were to call the police department, they should be able to tell you, yes, you know, Todd Harris is working in this particular neighborhood. So that's the most important sort of first step in terms of the logistics of getting the inspections done. We want to make sure everyone's aware that that first visit is unannounced, and it's during the day between 9 and 5. So to get the volume of inspections that we need to get done in the relatively short period of time, the way that we accomplish that is with that first visit being unannounced, and then also, if no one's home on the first visit, the inspector at that point will leave what we call our callback card. There's an example in the slide here. It's a yellow Post-it style note, similar to like what a FedEx or UPS delivery person would leave on your door. The note says basically, sorry we missed you. They leaves you with an appointment on the card in the future, so that the inspector will then come back at that point at that pre-designated inspection day and time. Now, if that day or time is not good for you, not convenient, you can always call our office and reschedule. So on the first visit, if you're not home or you're unavailable, they'll leave this yellow card. If the time and date on that card doesn't work for you, you can call and reschedule. If the time or date is good, you do nothing and they'll come back at that particular time and date. They'll also, we do appointments on the cards will typically be in the evening. So first visit during the day. If we find no one home, we assume a daytime appointment is probably not convenient. So on that yellow callback card, we'll leave you a nighttime appointment between 5 and 7 typically. If that doesn't work and you'd prefer daytimes, we will do daytimes, but most people are working or busy during the day. So we recognize that and we make our second appointment in the evenings. We also do some weekends, a little less frequently, but we do do some Saturdays as well. So when you call the office, they'll put you on a list for a Saturday inspection if you prefer. And when we have enough people on that list, we'll start to make appointments. Now, if the inspector comes back for that second visit and finds no one home again, what they do is they leave another different color callback card on the door. This time it's blue. You can't really see it on the slide, but it's a blue card. And the blue card is what we call our estimate card. So now upon that second visit, if the inspector finds no one at home, they're going to leave you that blue card. Now this time, instead of setting another appointment with you, they're going to leave you with some information about the inside of your property. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, if there's a finished basement, finished attic, the type of heat or air conditioning that it has, and the quality or condition on the inside. And they'll note that all here on the card so you can see it. Now that's an estimate to the highest, most reasonable potential of the inside of that house. And what that means is that if it's a 3,000 square foot colonial with an attic and a basement, it's reasonable to assume that those are finished. It's not reasonable to assume that there's 15 bathrooms in that property, but it's reasonable to assume if there's an attic and a basement that it's finished. So they'll estimate to the highest, most reasonable potential. And that's language that's written into our process by the statutes and by tax court opinions, where the tax court has determined that you as property owners have the right to refuse us entry to your property. We don't have police power. We can't force ourselves onto the property. But as part of your obligation to cooperate with the process, we want to make sure that the relatively small percentage of people who decide for their own personal reasons that they don't want an inspection, that those people don't gain an advantage by not allowing that interior inspection. So as long as we estimate to the highest, most reasonable potential, the courts have deemed that that's an acceptable method. Now, when you get this blue card, if you find that any of this information is incorrect, you can just call the office and schedule an appointment. We can't change the information over the phone. It's our obligation to the town to come out and see it in person. So we'll make an appointment at your convenience at a mutually convenient time. We'll come back out, we'll do the inspection, we'll change any information that may be erroneous that's on the card. If you don't have a finished basement, we come out and we see it's not finished and we change it. So the blue card sometimes gets people a little upset because they see information on there that may not be accurate. And they get a little upset, they call the office and they want to understand, why this was done. So we explain the estimate process in the highest, most reasonable potential, but then more importantly is we try to make an appointment to go back out and see it, firsthand and change it to be accurate based on what's in the property. So that's the logistics. So we're going to do questions at the end. So the logistics is basically to get this mass 6,000 plus properties done in a relatively short period of time. That first visit is unannounced. They'll knock. If they find no one at home or it's not a convenient time for you, they'll either leave you with that yellow card with an appointment or they'll leave it on your door. If that time is good, you do nothing. We come back, we do the second visit, and we finish the inspection. If the time is not good, you can call and reschedule, and then we'll reschedule for another time. If you find one of those blue cards on your door, the estimate card, if it's incorrect, or even if it's correct and you still want a physical inspection, you can still call us and we'll come out and do that interior inspection. So now that takes us to the actual inspection process. What do we do when we're at the property? And what we do is we break our inspection process down into two parts. There's an exterior inspection and an interior inspection. So the exterior inspection involves a site inspection as well as exterior measurements on the property. So first off, the site inspection. What the inspector does is when he gets to the property, he's looking for outside influences that might influence value. What does that mean? There's some pictures here in this slide that shows you, don't necessarily apply in Maplewood, but there's a picture of the beach with the ocean, there's a lake. Those sorts of like positive views could be a positive influence. If you have views, could be a positive view. So they're going to look around the property, not necessarily the property itself, but the area around it, the environment that property sits in, and make some notations about either good or bad influences. So this slide shows you some good ones, and this slide is some negative influences. And again, it's kind of hard to see in this slide because of the the resolution, but there's a nice colonial, and then out in the back here is actually a high tension wire stanchion. So perfectly fine colonial, but then you put that in the background, and obviously there's, how does that impact value? Well, that's the appraiser's job to figure that out, but it's the inspector's job who comes to the property to note that. So before the inspector leaves, he's going to look around, or she's going to look around and note some of these positives and negatives. This slide here shows some train tracks running in front of that house. Obviously, we have train in Maplewood, so we're going to note that. Other influences like commercial buildings, you have a residential property here, and then there's a commercial building next to it. So they're going to note those adjacencies, both good and bad, on their cards. Then they're going to actually look at the house itself. So the things that they detail on the outside, what style is the house, all the different styles are listed. They determine that. They also look at quality of the house, and this slide shows you some colonials in varying qualities. So they're all colonial homes, but they have different qualities. So they're going to look at quality as well on the outside. They also look at condition. Condition on the bottom here, you can have similar capes or ranch style homes in varying states of repair or disrepair. So they're going to look at that as well. Here's a slide again that shows you condition. 3 homes, all in varying states. This one needs a new roof, new windows, new siding. This one has some of those updates made, and this one has all those updates with new windows, new siding, new roof. So they're looking at those elements to determine the condition and quality on the outside. And then they go on to measure all the improvements on the property. So we don't actually survey the land. We don't do the lot sizes. We get that information from the assessor's office, from the tax map. But when the inspector is on site, they are going to measure all the improvements. So they're going to measure, obviously, the house, any outbuildings like detached garages, sheds, in-ground things like pools, attached items like wood decks and patios. All of that gets measured with a tape measure. And there's an example here of one of our inspectors measuring a house. And then what they do ultimately is they construct a sketch of the property. And this slide shows you a Cape Cod style house, and then the resulting sketch here in the middle, where the main house is detailed, and it's hard to see, but this says 1.5 S over B, so 1.5 stories over basement for a Cape Cod. And then the attached garage, there's a brick patio in the back, so it all gets measured out. And our inspectors use tablet computers in the field, so they're coming to the house with that computer. They're sketching with a tape, or they're measuring with a tape measure, and they're putting that information into the tablet on site. They're also taking pictures with the tablet. So the tablet has a camera as part of it, and they're going to take exterior pictures of the property also. So they're going to take a front, they're going to take a rear, and they take any detached structures as well. So garages, sheds, and anything else that they think is pertinent to that particular property. We don't take pictures on the inside unless we get your permission. So they may ask to do a picture on the inside if there's something particularly meaningful about the inside. It might be water damage in the basement. It might be some other damage in the attic. It could be a whole host of things. But before they take any pictures on the inside, they'll ask you. If you don't want them to, they won't. And that brings us to the interior inspection. So that first half of the visit is the exterior. And that's really where the inspector spends most of his or her time, is on the outside. The majority of that visit is spent measuring the improvements. It can take anywhere from 5 minutes if it's a simple ranch-style home. It could take upwards of 45 minutes to an hour if it's a large, complex colonial. So they'll spend most of their time on the outside. But when they do the inside is a much quicker inspection, much more brief. What they're doing on the inside, they do very minimal measuring, if at all. They spend their time really notating where the rooms are. They do a basic room count. Where are the bathrooms located? Where are the bedrooms? How many bedrooms? The kitchen, and so on. The other things that they do is they look at all the levels of the home. So if there's a basement, they go to the basement. If there's an attic with fixed stairs, they'll go up into the attic. We don't go into hatches or pull down stairs, but if there's a fixed stair attic, they'll go into the attic. And what they're looking for, not just in the basement and the attic, but on all levels, they're looking for finish, quality, condition. Is it heated and cooled? Number of fireplaces. So just relatively basic interior information. And you can see this slide shows some information about kitchens and really what they're looking for. Kitchens tend to either positively or negatively influence sale price. So updated kitchens can have a positive influence, and outdated or old kitchens can have a negative influence. So the inspectors are looking for that. And it's hard, again, apologize, it's kind of hard to see, but this is like a 1940s kitchen here. Obviously the appliances are more updated, but it's original cabinetry and countertops, original plumbing and electric, versus a more high-end kitchen here, center island, higher grade materials. So they're looking at that just as a buyer would come into a house and look at a house. Our inspectors try to go into a house with the mindset of a buyer. How would a buyer view this house? And they notate things accordingly based on that buyer's perspective. And here's the same idea with the bathrooms. Again, it runs the gamut from an older, original 20s, 30s bathroom up to a more complex, higher grade and quality. So they're going to look at that as well. And they also, as I said, they look for the basements and the attics. This gives you an example of some basements. They're noting the good and the bad. They're noting the level of finish and the quality of finish. You can go all the way from a walkout basement level with almost looks like a first floor type finish and quality to obviously this basement has some issues. So, you know, and they'll want to take pictures of this if you're okay with it, you know, because although they can document it on the form and they can write notes about the quality and the condition, and they can say it's got water damage and whatnot, obviously a picture is worth 1,000 words. So to take a picture of it, so for the appraisers like myself back in the office, if I can see that rather than write what they, or read what they wrote, it's just a little clearer for us. But again, you know, they're very, very easygoing. If you don't want those interior pictures, they're fine with just making the notes. And just a note about condos and townhouse properties. We do the same process for condos and townhouses. We do work with if there's a property manager, we'll work with the property manager in terms of managing the inspection process. But we do want to get to every unit, even though they're very similar. Typically, there's different model types. We'll go to every Model A. If there's 50 Model A's, we're going to every Model A, and we want to see the condition and quality. We also want to verify that what the information we have on file is accurate. So if it's listed as an A, we want to make sure it's an A, it's not a B or a C. So we do the same interior, exterior inspections with the condos and the townhouses. So that's step one. And step one, as I said, it's the inspection process. It's the part of the process that most property owners will be the most aware of. Obviously, you're going to be interacting with the inspectors. It takes the longest in terms of the timeline of the project. One other thing to be aware of and to note is that the inspector who comes to your house is not going to be the person who puts the value on your house. So that person is trained as an inspector. They're not necessarily an appraiser. Some of them are, most of them are not. Most of them are working towards either becoming an appraiser, but they're not necessarily appraisers, and they don't put value on your property. They're really just there to detail both the objective and subjective information about your property, and that's distilled then in the office by appraisers like myself that then take that information and distill value from it. So that's step one. Step two is to analyze all that information that these inspectors are gathering, as well as market data. And step two can happen at the same time as step one, and it does. So while the inspectors are out gathering that information, appraisers back at the office are determining neighborhood development, which you may be familiar with. Our company has worked in town for the past 5 years or so. We did a reval in 2011, and we did the reassessment in 13. And as part of that, most of you probably have seen that neighborhood map that we created. We'll be working with that map again and working with the ed and the assessor's office to determine if there's any changes that need to be made to that map. But the idea behind the map is really to differentiate different areas of town based on similar or homogeneous characteristics, like similar home styles or houses of similar age and similar size, houses of similar price ranges, houses that have the same external factors. So if there's a neighborhood that's affected similarly by the trains, then maybe that would be at one neighborhood of properties. And what we do is after we develop that map, we post it on our website. This is an example from Teaneck in Bergen County, but our neighborhood map for Maplewood was up when we did those other projects, and it'll be similarly posted for this one. And that shows you how we're sort of grouping the properties into like properties, and that helps us understand the market and see where value is coming from in the different areas of town. In addition to the neighborhood map, we also do a sales map. Sales map is basically just a tax map from the assessor's office with the sales plotted onto the map. And that helps us visually see where the sales are occurring and some of the characteristics of the sales that might be influencing their price. Again, like trains or busy streets or other characteristics that you can see on a map. And then, so that's step two. So step one is inspection. Step two is the analysis of the data that's coming in, as well as looking at the market. Step three then is to sort of review that information that's been gathered, as well as do some more market analysis. We do charts and graphs to show MLS, multiple listing service data we pull from to see where things are listed at, how long they're on the market for. All that information can help us determine what the market is doing in Maplewood. Similar to like what a real estate agent would send to you maybe in some of their promotional materials. We also analyze the data that comes in from the inspectors. So we'll run reports to make sure that the data is clean. If we're working in a neighborhood of 3,000 square foot colonials for the most part, and we see a colonial that's 4,000 square feet in the data, we want to make sure that that is correct and that it wasn't a mismeasure by the inspector, that it was maybe an addition that was put on that house. So we'll do that kind of data analysis to make sure that what the inspectors are collecting is accurate and verified. And that takes us to the fourth step. So after we inspect, we analyze and we review, we determine new values. We go over all the values with the assessor's office, we make sure and get their input into the process, make sure that they're comfortable and agree with our values. Once the values are set, the fourth step is to inform the public of those new values. And we do it by regular US mail, just a letter in the mail to all property owners. The owner of record gets the letter. The letter is a very simple letter. It just says what the new value of the property is. So it'll say your new value for 2017 is $500,000. It then invites you, if you'd like, to set up a meeting with a representative from the company. It's a one-on-one meeting. It's not in a public forum like this. It might be in a public place, but it's an individual one-on-one meeting where you can sit down, voice your concerns about the value. The representative from Appraisal Systems will sit with you, explain to you how we arrived at that new value. They'll show you all the information that the inspector gathered. They'll show you relevant sales to your property, and they'll answer any questions that you have. So that's after you get the letter. In the letter, there'll be instructions. And at this part of the process, the fourth step, when the letters go out and the information is starting to become public, that's where the website really becomes key. Up until that point, as Ernie pointed out, we post the status of the job, we post the location of the inspectors, we'll post the neighborhood map once it's been preliminarily established. But once the new values or the preliminary values are established, that's where the website really becomes key for property owners. You can go to the site, you can see all the recent sales, we'll post all that data for you. We'll post all the assessment information for you so you can see not only your property, but other properties you may be interested in and what their proposed assessments are. So all of that information gets out there and you can review all that online without even coming down for a hearing. If after you look at that, you still want to have a hearing, we're available to have hearings with as many people as want them. And that takes us to, and as I said before, it's really important, the website, it's usually the name or the address is usually right there, but I think it's getting whited out. So the address, as Ernie said, it's ASINJ. So it's Appraisal Systems Inc., New Jersey.com. Oh, there it is. Oh, somebody's getting fancy on me. So there, www.asinj.com. And then the fifth step is to meet with property owners. So you get the letter. If you're curious, you're unhappy, you're happy, but you want to know some more information, you can come down for what we call our informal hearings. So again, it's a one-on-one at a public site. You'll meet with someone from appraisal systems. They're held, we try to make it as convenient as possible. We'll hold them Monday through Saturday, typically. Monday through Friday, we do 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then Saturdays, we'll typically do 9 to 5. So again, we're trying to make it as convenient as possible. And the meeting lasts about 15 minutes. And like I said before, the purpose of the meeting is really to go over your record, and what we call your property record card, your PRC. And what that is all the information that's been collected by the inspector throughout the process. So you can go over that, make sure it's accurate. You can request that when you get your letter in the mail. You can request a property record card from us, so you can review it before you come down to the meeting if you prefer. At the meeting, we'll certainly give you a copy of that, and we'll answer any questions. And then what they also do is they take you through the sales, because sales is really what drives the value for the residential properties. So we're looking at recent sales. We do basically a 3-year sales study. We look at sales as old as 3 years, but we focus primarily on sales within the last year. And so what we'll do is we'll present those sales to you either on boards or in binders, organized by neighborhood, so you can review and say, okay, I'm assessed at $500,000. Here's 3, 4, or 5 sales in my neighborhood that sold for $475 to $550. It seems reasonable. Or maybe not. Maybe you're assessed for $500 and you can't find a single sale in your neighborhood for over $450. So maybe there's an issue. But we provide that information to you so you can do your own due diligence, your own reasonableness check to see whether or not the values make sense. And we provide these sheets on our website as well. So when you get the letter, you can go to the website, you can download all these sheets, you can go through them. We provide both the sheets and a spreadsheet format, so you can do analysis on a spreadsheet format if you'd prefer. And that's all available also at the informal hearing site. That takes us to the 6th step, which Ernie's going to walk us through.
Thank you, Jay. Now we return to the statutory scheme as it pertains to your rights as taxpayers. If after the hearing process, the informal hearing process, you remain dissatisfied or you're not convinced that the value placed on your property is truly representative of market value, you may appeal on or before May 1st with the Essex County Board of Taxation. Now, the rules of the County Board of Taxation are a little bit more formal than that which you have been exposed to in dealing with our representatives. When you come into an informal hearing, they're simply that, informal, and we will provide any and all information that we have to you. But when you file your appeal with the county, you're obligated to follow their rules and regulations. Number one, you cannot appeal taxes. They'll tell you that in the beginning. When you come in and discuss with our representative, you can discuss it and we'll discuss it with you. As a matter of fact, there are times when we put on our website a form that will allow you to compute what the reassessment has done relative to future taxes. You can discuss that with us, even though it's not germane to a county tax appeal. When you go to the county, you have to prove value. And you prove value by providing comparable sales, sales of property similar to yours. We have given all of that information to you because 100% of all of the usable sales that have taken place in the prior 3 years are posted on our website in the form of a list and in the form of that 8 by 10 illustration that Jason went over with you. It has a picture of the property, what it sold for, when it sold, and all of the key components, the major components that contribute to value. And that will assist you in determining whether or not your assessment is correct or not. So we're providing you with the information with which to prove us wrong. Because after all, in the final analysis, we're looking for one thing: uniformity and fairness. And we achieve that through a process that's totally open, with all of that information being shared with you before it becomes official and after it becomes official. So when you go to the county, you prove value. Commissioners will listen to your case, and they'll make a decision, and they'll inform you. If you remain dissatisfied, you can then file an appeal with the tax court of the state of New Jersey. The same rules of evidence apply. You cannot appeal taxes. We are, after all, living in the state of New Jersey, and everybody knows they're ridiculously high. So all we can achieve here, appraisal systems and you, is fairness. So at the tax court, it's a little more formal. Judge comes out in the robe. He's a member of the Superior Court of the state of New Jersey, assigned to the Property Tax Division. And you present your evidence in the form of comparable sales. If you do not achieve, in your opinion, the desired results there, you can file with the appellate division. Dissatisfied there, you can file with the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey. Very few residential properties eventuate at the Supreme Court, but there have been a few over the years. Failure there, it's over. Until the next year. And if you have energy left, you can start at the county and file a tax appeal with the Essex County Board of Taxation. And that is the process. And now Jason and I would be very happy to stay and answer any and all of your questions. You want to call on him, Mayor?
You mentioned the letter went out 3 weeks ago, and I didn't get it. We were gone for 3 weeks, and I'm concerned that possibly maybe this is too far. So is there a way to find out if we're in some low? Can we call your office and see?
Yeah, so you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah.
So the question was, the gentleman said he was away for the past few weeks and is concerned that he may have missed the inspection, that it might have happened and maybe the car blew away and he doesn't know whether or not the inspection took place. So simple answer is yes, you can call the office and we can certainly confirm very quickly whether or not we were there. Yes, yeah.
Jim.
Okay, so the question there was, what's the difference between a revaluation and a reassessment? It's an interesting question, and it's confusing to most lay people. It's even somewhat confusing to people in the industry, but a revaluation is where the entire tax list gets a new value, and it's required that the entire tax list get new values. It's required that all properties get full inspections. It's required that all the tables and all the data, everything that goes into those values, are completely done over again. A reassessment can run the gamut from something that is basically that all the way down to a much less onerous process for both the township and any firm that they hire. So a reassessment can be just a market analysis with no inspections. If the county tax board determines that the information on file is valid and is still relevant, then the county tax board can say, do a market analysis and show me the new values in town, but use the data that was collected usually less than 5 years ago, to then, analyze that market and spread it against that old data. In this particular case, the county tax board ordered a revaluation. But as Ernie said earlier, the proposal that Maplewood made back to the county tax board was, instead of going through the more expensive process of reval, we'll do a reassessment. And as we showed in the slide in the beginning, there was a full reval in 2011 and there was a reassessment in 2013. So the last time we did full inspections in the township was in 11. So it's about 5 years ago. It was right on that border of being, for lack of a better word, a little stale in terms of the inspection data. So the county tax board determined that it was acceptable to do a reassessment, but with full inspections. So in that particular iteration of reassessment, it's almost the same thing as a reval, because you're going out, you're doing full inspections, you're collecting all new data, you're doing a market analysis. In Maplewood, we have the advantage, I think is maybe the best word to say, of having the neighborhoods established already, and we're going to utilize them to a large degree from the assessor's office, that we had a hand in establishing back in 2011. So there's been some work that is not going to be repeated as part of a full reval. In addition, the township partnered with South Orange, because South Orange was also ordered for a reval by the Essex County Board of Taxation. So the two towns got together and did a joint bid to try to make it a little more enticing for reval companies, larger line item count, sort of a volume discount approach. So by partnering with South Orange and doing the two towns concurrently, they got a little bit better of a market advantage, a market price for the contract. And then because you share a school system, there's also a good reason to have both towns go through this process at the same time, and both towns on the same tax year have that 100% market value established. So it'll be beneficial for both towns from a school budgeting perspective to have all the assessments redone at the same time. Yes. So the gentleman, not to cut you off, but the gentleman said basically you're doing a reval in a sense. And we are, to a very large degree. It's basically a revaluation. There's very little technical difference in terms of what we're doing, reassessment, revaluation. But the benefit to the township was really mostly for price in terms of the cost of the contract. So
I have a couple of questions. We got an email. You mentioned this before, Jason, but let's just go over this again. Is it mandatory to have appraisers enter the house?
Okay, so no. As I said earlier, we don't have police power. We don't have, there's no legal requirement for you to allow us on your property. And the way that we operate is if there are locked gates or there are no trespassing signs, or if you call the office ahead of time and say, I don't want an inspector at my property, we're not going to come on the property. Locked gates, our inspectors don't jump fences. If they find a property that's unavailable, they'll just mark it, and when they come back for that second inspection, they'll try to complete their exterior inspection. But we do, if it's open, if the gates are open or there's no signs, no loose animals in the backyard, we will try to complete that exterior inspection on the first visit, and then we'll try to complete the whole thing if possible, but if not, we'll do the second half of it, the interior, on the second visit. But absolutely not. You have the right to refuse entry for the inspector. But I explained the estimate process, and there's ramifications on your end in terms of your assessment, whether or not it's accurate in terms of what's actually in your house, and then how that will affect whether you have a fair assessment based on market value and whether you may be paying a higher portion of taxes than you should be. And just a quick follow-up, The tax court and the tax board will require you, if you do file an appeal, either body will want you to have a full inspection. So it makes common sense that, you know, they want to make sure that the information that you're arguing about is accurate. If you come to the board and say, I don't have a finished basement, but you can't come in my house, then the board is sort of left in a position, it's an untenable position, and they say, okay, you don't have to let them in your house, but unless they see it, it's the highest, most reasonable potential of that property, it's going to stay in effect. So it's sort of a standoff at that point, and you can allow the inspection, and if there's no finished basement, it comes off and the assessment's reduced just on that point alone. Or you can continue to say, you know, it's your right, you don't want someone in the property, and you go from there.
Yes, sir.
So the two-part question, the first part was how long is this going to take? How long before you get new values? And then the second part is when do those values take effect in terms of both your assessment and the budget or the taxes? So the process will take roughly to the end of the year. We'll be doing inspections through the summer into the early and maybe even late fall, depending on weather. But we'll certainly be in town through Labor Day into the fall, probably through Halloween. Wrapping up inspections hopefully before Thanksgiving, and then new values will go out sometime in that time frame too. Sometime Thanksgiving, possibly into December, maybe even into early January, depending on weather and whatnot. But the new values will be effective for 2017. So even if the process goes a little over into 2017, it's retro to January 1st, 2017. So they're in effect on a calendar year basis. So it'll be effective for 2017. And the way that it'll affect your taxes, and this is regardless of whether there's reval or reassessment occurring. This happens every year in terms of the way taxes work. The taxes are on a fiscal year. So the taxes run typically July 1st through June 30th. So your tax bills, the first 2 quarters of your tax bills are always billed at half of the last year's value. So to make it simple, if you paid $10,000 in property tax in 2015, you're going to pay $5,000, half of the $10,000 for the first 2 quarters in 16. And then the last 2 quarters of every year are always a reconciliation. So the collector will determine how much you really owe. And if you've paid $5,000, but you owe $11 for the whole year, they'll just do the subtraction and they'll say you've paid $5, you owe $11, that leaves $6. So you'll pay $3,000 for each quarter in the third and fourth quarter. So, and that's the same process really. The difference now is that all of your values are changing. So whatever effect that the revaluation or reassessment has on your taxes, it will go into effect for that third and fourth quarter of 17. But that's no different than you ever see. That's the same process tax-wise every year.
So you also will have a calculator on your website. So what they will do is they'll take the 2016 tax rate and they will adjust that based on the new value. So you can take your new value, multiply it by the 2016 tax rate, and you'll get a difference of what you would have paid in 2016 with the new values compared to what you did pay. We do not strike the budget. We do not finalize the budget. And the school system doesn't finalize the budget, and the county still hasn't finalized the budget, but we don't do that until the spring of 2017. So, and honestly, the county waits until almost the summer. So the final tax rate usually doesn't get struck till May or June of 2017, but you will be able to take your new value and multiply it by a new estimated 2016 tax rate, and that'll give you a comparison of your current taxes to your new value. I have a couple more questions, and then we'll go back here. There was a question of how many reassessments and revaluations have we had since 2000? I happen to know that because I was the mayor for all of them. We had a revaluation in 1982, and then we did not have another revaluation until 2000. And that 18 years, Maplewood changed its values pretty substantially. Then we had a revaluation in 2011, and then we had a reassessment in 2013. And now we're having another reassessment in 2016. How much will the reassessment cost the town? $424,000. And it's about 7,200 properties or more. Yeah, so, you know, it's a lot of properties and there's a unit cost and it all gets added up. I think you've mentioned why we're doing a reassessment so soon. We were ordered by the Essex County Tax Board to do that, and we have to comply. And if you've been following the newspaper, and actually if you saw the editorial in today's Star Ledger, a number of towns across the state, even big cities, are being ordered to do this and keep up current to the true value. You had a question here.
I'm just going to, we'll do it one at a time, just so the first question is, what counts as a bedroom, was the question. The way we detail a bedroom is it has to have three things. It has to have a door, a closet, and a window that's you can get into and out of, you know, if there's a fire. So there has to be an egressable, if that's the right word, egress through the window. So door, window, and closet, that's our criteria for how we count bedrooms. No, you can have what we call a railroad bedroom. So the question was, does the door have to be on a hallway? So there's situations where you have a bedroom and then there might be a door, sort of like if you have two railroad cars and you're going from one car to the other, where that back bedroom has no door onto a hallway. We would still classify that as a bedroom. However, the inspector would definitely note that it's a railroad layout, and there might be a negative adjustment applied for that railroad layout.
Let me just add that it's primarily the size of the house that drives the value, the per square foot price of living area. And if you have a house that's 1,500 square feet, typically you would have 3 bedrooms there. If you have more than that, 5 bedrooms, you might be looking at functional obsolescence because the bedrooms would be so small in that area as to cause some functional problems. So basically what drives the value is the square footage of the living area. And bedrooms, for the most part, describe the house, unless it becomes 2 bedrooms and you get into a functional obsolescence situation. Yes, and I'll let
Just repeat it.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, that's the crux, that's sort of.
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry, right. So the question was, basically, he was interested in what criteria the county used to determine or make the order. And that I can't answer because I'm not privy to that. I don't know exactly what their thinking was on that. As Ernie mentioned, though, they do use those 2 criteria, the ratio in town and the coefficient. There's another 11 criteria. There's actually 13 total criteria, I believe, that the county uses to determine revaluation or reassessment. So I don't know, honestly, but I can only assume that they're looking at ratio, coefficient. Number of appeals is also a relevant statistic that they look at, because those appeals end up making the tax list less uniform, because you could have 2 like properties where one person appeals and gets a judgment. So now that's a lower assessment than the other one, even though they're the same property. So that also drives their thinking too, to a large degree. But in terms of your other question about neighborhoods, the gentleman was saying that he lived in 2 different neighborhoods in town over the course of about 30 years, and he was interested to see those changes in whether we post information relative to the sales ratios in the different neighborhoods? And the answer is yes. I mean, that's part of our analysis, is looking at it on a neighborhood basis. We do spreadsheets where we take all the usable sales, we put them on a spreadsheet, and we run coefficients and ratios on those individual neighborhoods to see where the sales are occurring, at what levels they're occurring. We share that obviously with the assessor's office. It's somewhat up to the assessor in terms of how much they want to make public. We can certainly make them public in Maplewood and put them on the website, so you can see, you know, how the different neighborhoods are being assessed. I don't think so. I think we've taken that down. We take it down after a period of time. We usually leave the data up through the first year appeal process so that homeowners, property owners can have access to the sales data. But then once the county board season concludes in the next year, we take it down. So I don't believe 11 is up. We could, I mean, you know, we have.
We sometimes put up a form when we post the new assessments. We
Mr. Mike.
post the old assessment on that. We post the old assessment on that spreadsheet as well. So you will be able to have access to that information that you're seeking. And the neighborhood is also listed. We report them in block and lot sequence, and the neighborhood, a number that has been assigned to that neighborhood is part of that descriptor. And so you'll be able to have access to all of that information that you want.
Okay. We have a couple of questions. When do the inspections begin? I saw someone out today.
So the inspections began, I would say at this point, it's been about maybe 5 to 10 business days that they've been out there. We're starting primarily in the southern end of town on the borders of Newark and Irvington and Union. So right now we have 3 inspectors in town that are working in those areas, and the intention is to shift people north and west. They're in the south and east sort of part of town. We're going to shift them north and west as the year goes on. We have a larger crew right now in South Orange. We have about 7 people in South Orange doing residential inspections. As South Orange is a little bit smaller than Maplewood, we're going to start there. We're going to conclude our inspections there, hopefully by the end of the summer, and then shift the majority of those people into Maplewood. So the crew is starting a little bit on the lighter end in terms of quantity of people, and then it'll grow as the summer goes on.
Question, will the value of comps used from sales in prior years be adjusted to allow for fluctuations in the market between the date of that sale and the current market conditions?
Yes. So what we do is we look at each sale and the sale date, and then we do a time adjustment to the sale, similar to what a financial refi appraiser would do if they're looking at sales. I may not have mentioned this during the presentation, but there's a fixed date of value that has to be ascribed to each property, and that's October 1st of the pre-tax year. So this is for the 2017 tax year, which means that values are as of October 1st, 2016. So the sales are all time adjusted to that date. So if we're using sales data from January of 2016 on a particular sale, our spreadsheets will allow for an adjustment either up or down depending on our analysis of the market. And what we do in that regard is we do a paired sale analysis, which is a standard appraisal technique where you take the same property that's sold twice in a time period, and if there's been no improvements to that property, if it's sold for 500 year, 2015, and then it resold for 525 in 2016, you can do a monthly analysis and say it went up a certain percent a month. And you do that across all the paired sales you find in town, and you develop a paired or a time adjustment that you can then apply either on a gross basis across the whole town or on a neighborhood basis, because again, we're looking at all the sales on a neighborhood basis, so we can look in a particular neighborhood and say, were there any paired sales? What was the time adjustment in neighborhood 26? Was that different than, say, neighborhood 2? And you can see the neighborhoods on the website and their numbers. So we do those time adjustments.
Julie. So the question is, if the if a piece of property is sold for greater, the sale price is greater than the assessed value, do we change the assessed value on our books? And the answer is no.
No. That is known as the welcome stranger tax.
Yes, you can't do that.
And that has been declared as illegal a long time ago.
So,
Pardon? Yes.
yeah. So
New Jersey courts.
all the values that we have on our books are from 2013, no matter what the sales have been from 2013 to this point. So the question is, how is land valued?
So the question, the question is basically, or first the acknowledgement that there's a land and improvement component to the total assessment, which is true. There's land improvement and total. Now, for the purposes of appealing, and you may have run into this, the state tax court and the county tax boards really are only concerned with that bottom line number. So although for accounting reasons and other reasons, the Division of Taxation requires there to be a land and building, in terms of uniformity, in terms of fairness and market value, they're looking at that bottom line number and saying, can that property sell for $500,000, yes or no? Show me sales that either support it or disprove that. Now, having said that, because there is that land and building, people fixate and get focused on the two numbers. The way that we arrive at the land and building in a town like Maplewood, which is basically fully developed, there's not very many vacant lots at all, and there aren't that many teardowns in town, although there are a few. The way that we arrive at it is through an extraction. And what that means is we take improved sales where there's a house that's sold for 500. We do an inspection at the house. We know how big it is. We know what condition it's in. We know how many bedrooms, bathrooms, all the components that go into that improvement value. We ascribe an improvement value to it, let's say $200,000, and then what's left over is the land. So we ascribe $300 to the land on that sale, and we run that against all of the recent sales in town by neighborhood. And then out of that spreadsheet, we're able to determine a reasonable price per buildable lot in a given neighborhood, and it might be $300,000. And then we run that against, obviously all those sales and see how that turns out. And then we ascribe a formula to that gross land value based on size of the lot, location of the lot. Is it on a busy street? Is it on a quiet street? Is it near the railroad? Is it walking distance to the train, but not too close that it's noisy? Is it near a commercial district? All those things go into that sort of hopper of how we determine. But it's done through that abstraction method where we don't have either the quantity or the quality of vacant lot sales to really determine what vacant land is worth in town on a residential basis. So we use the improved sales and back out the improved values and arrive at land value. Now, that means that there's going to be different land values around town. Absolutely. And I think from a common sense standpoint, I would disagree with you respectfully that, if you're living along Wyoming, let's say, the land along Wyoming is more valuable than the land along Newark Way. It just is, Now, the zoning is different. It's a larger lot. Okay. She always.
Oh, Julie, we're not going to go back and forth. Let him explain it. If you don't, when you get your letter, you'll have an opportunity to have this conversation.
Let me just add another reason why some people, when they look at the lots and they look at the assessments, they feel that might be a lack of uniformity. We use a site value approach to value. The value of your lot is predominantly inherent in your ability to put a building on it. It's called the situs. And That's where the major part of the value is. So if you have a lot that's in a 1 acre zone and it's 1 acre exactly, it has a 1 acre site and there's no excess land. If you have a lot that's an acre and a half, you have the main value in the site and a much lesser value for excess land. So if you look at it, you might come to the conclusion that, well, lot is time and a half the size of, lot B is time and a half the size of lot A, but the assessment is not. And that's because the major part of the value is ascribed to the building site and the ability to put a house on that site. Once you have that, the rest is just excess land, and it has a much lesser value.
All right, let me just go a couple more here. Can reassessments be adjusted as a result of the informal meeting? If so, what percentage of meetings result in adjustments?
So the answer is yes. That's, we do adjust those initial letters that we send out they're not the final values. They're our initial values. They don't become final until we submit all the information to the tax board and to the town. So they're not final and they're open for adjustment until they're final when we submit them. So we do adjust them, and it can be for a whole host of reasons. We don't have a preset determination of if this person comes in, they're automatically going to get a reduction. It really just depends on the information that you bring to the table. You could be pointing out things about the property that maybe aren't accurately reflected in the record card. We might do another inspection to confirm that information. We might not, and just make adjustments based on what you bring us. We might do a neighborhood reanalysis and make adjustments to land value in a neighborhood perhaps after the initial letters go out. So there's a whole host of reasons that we might change it, and we don't really keep statistics on how much or what percentage. Every town is completely different. Even every project within the same town is different. So the rate at which we changed properties in the 2013 reassessment will definitely be different than the rate that we're going to change them in 16, because it's just different issues, different people come in. So we don't really keep those statistics.
Okay. And do you have any opinion on the benefits of hiring a lawyer versus presenting evidence oneself? This person seems to think that there's maybe a bias towards having rulings when the attorney is present.
Well, I mean, it's certainly more expensive to have a lawyer, but there's no need, both at the county tax board, certainly at the informal, there's no need for it. I mean, some people do come with attorneys, but that's their choosing. There's absolutely no need for it at an informal. Some people do hire attorneys at the county tax board. Some people do, hire attorneys for the state tax court. You don't need to. It's really the property owner's comfort with the process and how well they can present themselves. I mean, obviously you're paying for a service if you're using a lawyer. The lawyers typically will take a percentage of your reduction. They do it sort of on a contingency basis. If they get you a reduction, they take a percentage for a given number of years. So that's sort of how they recoup their fee.
And this person also has a personal question here, but I'm just going to advise you when you get your new ruling to come in get new value, come in for an informal and have that conversation or have a conversation with our assessor. How often do valuations go down? If at all, if ever?
Well, I mean, the valuations actually went down from 2011 to 2013, if you remember. That was the whole point of why we did it so quickly after 2011. We did the full reval for 2011. Those numbers were created in the market that was evident in town in 2010 and 2009 to some degree. And then because the market was on a downward trajectory at that point, by 2013, we started to see a lot of appeals that we couldn't really defend at the county tax board and at the state tax court. So that was part of the rationale behind, we actually lowered a lot of values in town for 2013. Since then, the market has rebounded. So now we're on an upward slope. And that's part of the reason why the county, I think, tax board ordered. So, it really depends on the environment, whether we're raising or lowering values. In this particular instance, the vast majority of properties are going to go up in value. I can't say that across the board every single property, but if you just look at that overall ratio in town of about 88%, that is telling you that properties are basically undervalued as a whole by about 12%, if that ratio is accurate. So that would lead you to believe that most properties that in town will go up in assessment, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are going up. And that's a very important point to remember, because if all assessments rise by 12%, as Ernie said earlier, the mathematics of it is that the tax rate will decrease by 12%. So where you need to really be looking is whether or not you're rising or falling higher than the average. So we'll post that on our website. We'll say the whole town went up by 50%, just making numbers up. If you went up by more than 50%, then you're guaranteed to see a tax increase. If you went up by less than 50%, you're guaranteed to see a tax decrease, apples to apples, budget to budget.
Okay,
So,
we're going to try to go to people who haven't asked questions. 1, 2, 3.
It's hard to say in Maplewood because as I said earlier, I mean, you really run the gamut from very small ranch homes, that might take 15 minutes total in and out, to the larger homes, on the northern end of town that could take upwards of an hour to an hour and a half full, the whole inspection. What's important to remember about that is the property owner typically only sees the interior inspection. And the interior inspection is actually the shortest part of the whole process. So we have a lot of property owners that come in and they say, inspector was in my house for 5 minutes. How could he possibly have determined all the things he needed to in 5 minutes? It was a sham. And what they don't realize is that inspector was probably at your house for 20 minutes measuring the outside and doing everything on the outside, which is really the more time-consuming part of the process to determine the square footage and the condition and quality. So, overall, I would say if you wanted an average, which really in this town isn't all that useful, maybe a half an hour total, but it could run the gamut depending.
So that was the answer to how long it would be for an inspection. Yes, sir.
Right, we're doing South Orange this year as well.
Ask him repeat his question.
Yeah. Is the value of your house going to go down if your neighbor isn't properly maintaining their house? Now, that gets into the question of whether the lack of maintenance has created an incurable situation. If it's curable, the answer in most cases is paint it, mow your lawn, take care of your property. It's pride of ownership. But if the property has been neglected to the point where it's incurable, then yes, it does affect the value of your property, and that's called economic loss of value, where a subject property loses value because of an outside agent. Jason touched on some of the factors: railroad, high tension wire, traffic, gas station next door, and you can add to that a neighbor who has created an eyesore. But again, most times remedy is fix it.
All right.
So it seems that our real estate market in Maplewood and Southport is going up, down, up, down. Is there a way, I just feel like it's a little unfair for us in the past 5 years to go through from this week of these sort of whatever processes. I mean, it's $400,000 right now, times 3 other times, it's $1.2 million that we're paying for. Is there a way for you that you work with the county and the state so that when a market has these ups and downs, that we can maybe put a hold on going through this? Because what I worry about is 3 years from now, we're going to go through this process again. The property values go down, and we're going to shell out another $400,000 for reassessment.
Well, the answer is yes. I think what our hope is, and our plan was to do these every 10 years. We didn't have a choice, and really the 2013 was to do a market correction because the 2011 numbers were high, and then we saw some kind of, prices sort of settling downward and going, trending down. And there was a rebound, we needed to rebalance again, so that's why it was 2,000. That was our own, we talked with the county and said, look, we need to correct this because we're going the wrong way. We're just a very hot town. People are moving here, and these numbers get out of whack when you have that. We would hope that the county would let us sit with these numbers for as long as they're valid, and we hope that's going to be 10 years. But, remember, this is about making sure that everyone's paying their fair share. Oftentimes, when you have these fluctuations in the market, somebody gets left out. I don't think that's the case now. It looks like it's across town, so maybe it'll hold up. But yeah, we're not going to, we don't want to roll over, but on the other side, we can't fight the tax. We can only postpone this for a few years. I mean, part of the problem in 2000 is we were asked to do the reassessment in 97. In 96 and 97, people were saying, you got to do this reassessment. Real estate people were telling us. And we said, no, Midtown Direct just came in, let it ride, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to hurt the marketplace. And then we finally had to do it in 2000, and the whole thing exploded. So you miss these, and you have some really dramatic repercussions if you wait too long. So you have to time these. But yes, we don't want to do them every 3 years. That's not our goal. Just a couple more things. There's a bunch of questions about, and maybe Ed, you're the one. Somebody says if they get rid of 1 bedroom and a half bath, if they take out a shower, would the taxes go down? Someone says they have a small bathroom in the basement. Would getting rid of the bathroom in the basement lower taxes? Someone talked about a room, a 3-season room without any heat source. So what would you say to folks? I mean, I think some folks are afraid either to do repairs to their house, make improvements. They may want to take things out so they don't get assessed higher. What would you say to those folks?
I would look at that which is the major contributor to value. Number one, the fact that it's Maplewood, location, location, location in the town. And then it's the size of the house, the quality of construction, and the size of the lot. Those are the major contributors to value. You want to make sure that those have been accurately recorded and described on your property record card. And then to a lesser degree, whether the kitchen has been modernized, the bathrooms have been modernized, and the condition of the overall condition of the property. Those are the major contributors to value. Now, at the low end of that is a bathroom in the basement. And it was about 10 years ago, I was giving a talk to a group of senior citizens in Bergen County. And I was a senior citizen at the time, too. I've gotten younger since then. And a gentleman in the first row said, I have a toilet in my basement. You mean to tell me you're going to charge me for that basement? And I said, well, yes, it's part of the real estate, but put it in perspective. And I went through that scenario that I just went through. And he said, well, the hell with you, I'm going to rip it out. And I misspoke, and I said, sir, at our age, we want those toilets in as many rooms as we can get them.
Okay, all right. Frank.
This reassessment is really, it's a personal thing. Listen to some of the examples that we've got online and some others stories here. So, understanding the process that Jason going through this evening. Right now, the review process, the analysis process is on a rolling basis. My question with regards to point forward information. Are we going to roll out that information as well? Or are you going to disseminate it all at the same time for residents? I think there's some anxiety. So the question is, are you going to use the opportunity to roll it out as you continue to analyze and review, or are we getting our information at once, which may cause some issues?
Yeah. So the question, in case you didn't hear, was basically about point 4, which was the inform point. Are we going to roll that out, or are we going to just inform everyone at the same time? And the way that we handle that is we do it all at the same time. And there's a little bit of a rationale behind that, although it is a large sort of data dump at that point. Up until that point, we're really working with the assessor's office. These numbers are in flux to a large degree. Until all the inspections are done, until all the review is done, until that information is had a chance for the assessor to look at it, review it, give his feedback, it's really not, it's a work product at that point. And while we want to be open and transparent, it's not like we want all of that out there because it all might get changed, and there could be confusion in that part of it as well. If we start rolling out and we decide, you know what, we really took another look at this, we want to lower values in this one neighborhood for whatever reason. As an example, if that information's already out there, there could be confusion about, well, which number's right? You posted 500, now I'm at 450, So we tend to wait till everything's done, everything's reviewed and approved. Then we send it out there as a mass, mass mailing and put it up on the website. But at that point, it still is open for adjustment. But I think until that is done, I think it can cause more confusion, although I agree with you that it is a lot of information to digest at one time. The informal hearing process can last, depending on timeline, can last anywhere from a month to 2 months. So there's usually a lot of time built into the process for people to digest it. So that's historically how we've done it.
And even more time till the May 1st.
Right.
Okay, I have Jim and Tim, but no, before you guys do, because you guys asked, I have Ellen who didn't ask. So I just want to do the first questions first.
Me? Two things. One subjective, qualitative, and the other one being the qualitative thing is, I look forward to revals. I appreciate, because it is not related to taxes, it's related to a property that you own. The tax application is really not related to the revale. So I look forward to my property value going up yet again, so that when I sell, because I can't possibly afford to retire here and pay property taxes, I'll be in good shape.
Okay, so the comment was that this person is happy to see the revaluation. Okay, so you have a question too?
I have a wonky question.
Yeah.
I moved from working in electronic publishing and library renovation for 40 years to working for Morris County 2 years ago in the GIS group. And I went to a meeting recently, and this acronym was mentioned like 5 times about CAMA, which I understood to be a program for data entry, for data collection, for people doing assessments. And I wondered if that was just a generic name for any kind of program. What kind of a tab? Do you have an industry standard application on these tablets for data collection? Or do you have a proprietary data collection tool that you developed?
Okay, so the question was, what program, what computer program do we use? And the acronym is true. It's CAMA, C-A-M-A, and that stands for Computer Aided Mass Appraisal. And that's an industry standard sort of generic term for the program. There's 2 programs that are primarily used in the state of New Jersey. One's called Microsystems and one is called Vital. Essex County uses Vital almost exclusively. Maplewood used to use Microsystems, so they used Microsystems historically up until this point. The last 2, the reval in 2011, and I believe even the reval in 2000, and the reassessment in 2013 were done through the Microsystems CAMA program. This time, however, we're using Vital. Vital, again, like I said, is used throughout the county. It's the county standard in Essex County, so we'll be using the Vital CAMA.
Okay.
And the CAMA system,
Use the mic.
which the CAMA system is the tool by which we can guarantee that all properties are assessed by the same standard of value. But before we do that, we study the market and we adjust that CAMA system to the market and then use it uniformly to achieve the goal of the same standard of value to all properties.
Okay, is there anyone who has not asked a question yet? Yes, go ahead.
Is it reasonable to assume that two properties are reassessed in the same amount, say, their taxes? And conversely,
So the question was, and I want to make sure I understand you, because the question, as I understand it, was that if two properties, as a result of the reassessment for 2017, have identical assessments, would their taxes be identical? And the answer is yes. I mean, the formula that is used to determine taxes is your assessment times the tax rate. So if they start with the same number, they're going to end up, it's the same tax rate, so they'll end up with the exact same taxes. And then it follows that a higher assessment's going to eventuate to higher taxes, and a lower assessment will be lower taxes. Yeah, so the question was on the improvement side. We had a question before about land. The improvement side, how do we handle that? And what we do is we use what's called the New Jersey State Manual. It's a manual that's mandated by the Division of Taxation to be used for residential purposes, where it's a cost manual. So the state does their own analysis of what things cost to construct, and they require that we use that. It gets integrated into that CAMA program, and it's essentially a calculator that we use to determine replacement cost of the improvements, less depreciation. So the depreciation is really where that subjective, the objective part of that is the cost manual is the cost manual. And you can argue costs if you want, but it's sort of like Moses with the tablets. Like the cost manual is your costs, and now the subjective part of that is what the appraiser, what the inspector, what you believe to be the depreciation in the structure for a number of different reasons, primarily physical, but there's other depreciation too. But that's where the subjectivity gets brought in, but it's all based off that New Jersey State Manual, the cost manual, less depreciation. Yep. So the question was, Maplewood is not necessarily unique, but it's unique in the market in general, in that there are much older homes here with, construction techniques and construction materials in the homes that you can't, replace with today's technology. So the way the manual deals with it, there's replacement cost and there's reproduction cost. And the manual that we use, it's reproduction cost. So they actually do figure out, like, what would it cost to put up that plaster and lath? What would it cost to have the radiators in the property, if that's what's there? Now, if there's more modern technology in the property, it's going to be costed out at whatever is physically in the property. But there's those two methodologies that are used, replacement versus reproduction. And I believe the manual is reproduction, not replacement.
Okay. Jim, you have a second question, or is that, let's go. We have to move.
Mm-hmm. Right, so two-part question. One is properties under construction, how are those handled for the tax list? And then a subsequent question about abatements on new construction. So the first part is properties under construction, whether it's residential or commercial. We're going to go there, we're going to visit it at least once, possibly more during the process. We're going to take a look at the property in an as-is state when we're there. We are going to value those properties as of October 1st. what condition they're in. So if it's a residential house and it's half done, it'll essentially get a half improvement value for that next year's tax list. And then the assessor's office is always doing monitoring the construction permits, and Chris goes out and does inspections and does added assessments. So when that's completed, the remainder of that value will go on for the subsequent year when a CO is issued for that structure. So under construction, it'll be an as-is partial value, depending on the state of construction on October 1st, and then the full value will be put on whenever it's CO'd, whenever the certificate of occupancy is issued by the building department. And then
You'll do a land value, right?
right, it'll be full land value. So again, those two parts to the assessment, land improvement, it'll be full land value and a partial improvement value based on the state of construction on October 1st. The abatements, that's something that's also known as a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot program. And some of the newer properties that are being constructed, not just in Maplewood, but South Orange, all over the county, they're going in as pilots where there's a predetermined payment to the town for taxes. And there's a couple of different methodologies that are used to arrive at what that payment in lieu of taxes should be, all open to the public in terms of how it's arrived at. I don't want to get into the minutia of it here, but the end result for us is that as an appraisal firm, we're still treating that property as what's its market value. So regardless of the agreement that they may have with the township about how they're going to pay taxes, we're going to place a market value on that property. It'll go on the tax list. Typically, the improvement goes on as an exempt entity, so it goes on as with a value, but there's no taxes ascribed to it, like this structure goes on as an exempt, gets a value, goes on the tax list, but no taxes are collected from this property. Churches, schools, municipal structures, things like that, all have value, but they're not taxed. It's non-rateable. Now, the pilot is typically, the improvement is non-rateable, but the land pays a tax. So they negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes for the improvement, goes on the list as an exemption, and the tax goes on the list for the land as a standard, whatever the value of the land is under that building. The pilot does have an impact on the tax rate because that improvement value is not built into the overall rateable base of the town. So you're taking that out of the calculation of your taxes. So, but you're getting taxes for that improvement. So it's sort of a hard thing to conceptualize, but you're lowering your overall rateable base, which may be increasing your tax rate a little bit, but you're collecting those taxes in a different manner directly from the property owner through that pilot. There's other reasons as well that we don't want to get into the minutia.
We have 2 and 3.
How much do things like huge shade trees, for example, impact this? For example, we have a property with a lot of large shade trees, something that you can walk up and knock on your door, and that's different than something else. In large part because of not landscaping, but flowers. I'm talking about big shade trees, ornamental. And over the last few years, I've lost 4 or 5 huge shade trees, 10 big, huge variables in their ornamentals. And in terms of selling the property, we have a huge impact on the price. But I don't know if you guys can evaluate that.
The answer is no. Landscape is not considered as a result of looking at each individual property. When you have a neighborhood that has a very high degree of pride of ownership, it has an impact on the sales of the houses contained within. So it's reflected in that way. But we do not count trees, we do not count landscaping. Landscaping comes and goes very, very quickly. Yeah. And that describes the difference between market price and market value. Market price being that which one set of negotiators, a seller and a buyer, would arrive at for a specific property. Market value is the collective wisdom of all of the sellers and all of the buyers for similar properties. And so that's why you'll find we may come up with an assessment on a particular house that's sold for $550,000. We may come up with a value of $525,000 because it sold for a little bit more than what was the typical price for that kind of house. And it might be that big shady tree that influenced a buyer. Curb appeal, it's called. Oh, I've got to have that house. And when you walk up and you say something like that in front of a realtor or in front of the owner, you're hooked. You've lessened your negotiation.
They measure everything. It just so happened that last time this happened, I either came out of the house or came home, I forget which, right at the time that I was measuring the house with this little tape. And I learned about the logistics of that because he was consistently measuring 3 to 5 feet past the end of the house and marking that like every direction. And when I questioned him on it, he made some kind of waved his hands in the air, said something about, oh, that's the way we have to do it. And I couldn't get straight answers to what I was supposedly trying to account for, like he was doing it, because, you know, that sure as hell isn't the way it is on a blueprint for my house.
Well, that's not the way he's supposed to measure. And I'll let the guy in charge of that answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, the question was, the last reval, the woman said that she met the inspector while he was measuring, and he was measuring past the house in the different directions, and why was that done? And the only thing that I can think of on the spot is that, typically the house is not just the box. There's typically other, you might have a porch or a one-story section. If he's measuring past it, what we try to do is minimize the number of times we have to pull the tape, because it's all about speed to some degree. So if there's multiple, if the main part of the house is 40 feet wide, but there's a projection that goes another 10 feet, they might pull it past to the 10 feet and make that measurement in one tape measure pull. But if it's wrong and you measure your house and he was 5 feet over in every direction, certainly it's part of your responsibility, I think, to, you have one property to make sure you get right. We have 7,000 properties to make sure we get right. And we're going to try our best to get all 7,000 right. But when we send out the information, we'll send you your record card. You'll see that sketch. And, you can go out and take that measurement. And if it's 45 and not 40, we'll fix it. But the only thing I can think of on the spot is that he was trying to get 2 measurements in one. If he wasn't and it's wrong, we'll fix it. But they typically don't go past the house unless there's a reason to. No, we typically won't go by blueprints. We'll look at them as a point of information. But architects have a different standard in terms of how they measure and what they account for as livable area, not livable area, interior. Not counting the thickness of the walls in some ways. So we'll look at that to make sure we're in the ballpark. But we're not just going to say, all right, the architect said 3,701 square feet, so that's what we're going to make it.
So if you have, when you get your evaluation, if you have any questions, make an appointment to go for an informal review. Get your $424,000 worth of their services. I mean, we're paying them to do this, so you need to be comfortable. So schedule the informal review and just ask those questions. Or if you see something wrong, you can call Jason's the person in charge. You can go on ASI website, shoot them an email, and have that dialogue with them. Before I get to you, Tim, I just want to, someone who wrote to us and asked if assessed taxes, do assessed taxes ever go down? I'm not sure exactly. I think she's talking about her taxes increased 15%. I'm not sure how that happened. I would suggest whoever wrote this come in and speak to our assessor as to what the factor was that made a 15% increase. I don't know if you had work done or not. But I guess the question here is there a contradiction, she asked us in a way, is there a contradiction between maintaining the quality of properties and being penalized for making those improvements? How do you answer that?
That's what I spoke to before. It's called pride of ownership and lack of proper maintenance. And so the system as designed does not penalize pride of ownership. You paint your house on a regular basis. You manicure your lawn. You put appropriate amount of shrubberies, and the house is consistent with the neighborhood, if you will. Pride of ownership. No, you're not penalized for that, nor are you rewarded for the fact that you let the house go, that it needs paint, it's peeling, that the grounds are in need of an aesthetic uplift. To that degree, no. You're not penalized for pride of ownership. You're not rewarded for a lack of maintenance. The answer, even though a realtor would come up with, or the sales price may differ on both of those properties. That's a condition, and it's not normal maintenance. What we talked about on those three properties are like replacing the roof, replacing windows, changing the siding, and doing that which you have to do. If you don't repair a property and you neglect it over a large span of time, then it becomes a situation where it's incurable. You can't spend a large enough amount of money to fix it because it exceeds the total value of the property. And so the illustrations showed those examples.
We're going to do two more questions here and here. Tim, go ahead.
My question is a clarification earlier on the math aspect. So county mandated is because ratios in the coefficient. Ratio basically saying one side of town was 1.0, one side of town was 27. That information on a neighborhood basis is going to be interested more than the 2011 rebound.
Right.
Is that information available on the website so I can see where the things are out of whack?
You'll be able to derive it from that which we put on the website. Yes. Well, you have to wait until we post it.
But I'm saying they made a request to the town to do the rebound because the numbers are out of whack.
Yeah.
There's no math.
Well, no, as Jason said, we can't get into the mindset of why the county ordered it, but you'd
There's no
have to
map.
ask them that question.
There's no map that we have
No.
that shows, it just is in the aggregate, it's out of whack.
They don't maintain that map. I mean, you could construct it.
Use the mic, use the mic, use the mic.
You know, the issue of the map is something that, you know, you could construct that. It's not something that I'm aware that the town maintains. It's not something I'm aware that the county maintains. They might, I don't know. I'm not sure, but I can see why you're interested in that. But I'm not aware that it's maintained anywhere.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, towards the exterior.
So the question was usable space versus the actual exterior measurements. And what we do is, again, that New Jersey State Manual kind of guides us in our procedures. So the manual specifies that we measure from the outside. We don't take into account thickness of walls. That's something that maybe architects do when they do their measurements in their livable areas. But we measure to the same standard across the entire municipality, as well as across the entire state is really measured that way for property tax purposes. It's an exterior measurement with, there's no adjustment that I'm aware of that's made for thickness of walls, because then, you know, you're really getting into somewhat of the minutia of, like, you know, is it 10 inches thick? Is it 8 inches? At what thickness does that become such an issue that you make some kind of adjustment, and what adjustment do you make for that thickness?
And it also becomes a cost-effective question. Are you going to, by spending that amount of detail and the cost associated to do it, is it going to produce a better result? And the answer is no. You can pay for a specific appraiser to come out, and you can pay him or her $2,000 for an appraisal. And they will do a finite inspection, but they're no more accurate than we would be in a mass appraisal approach, because we have access to all of the sales and all of the information that's relevant. And I think what is our cost? About $70 per
think so.
property. And when you're talking about the kind of appraisal that might cost you upwards of $2,000, it's a no-brainer.
Okay. Oh, sorry. We are going to conclude. Thank you very much for coming out and hanging in there. Thank you watching us at home. If you have questions, you can direct them here to town. We will forward them to ASI, or you can contact ASI directly. Tomorrow morning at 8:30, we're doing a commercial and industrial presentation. If any of you own commercial or industrial properties here, that's a different way of reassessing property. So we'll be back here in about 11 hours. So you're free to come back if you have nothing else to do. But thank you very much for coming out.